Okay, so section 9.6 is, I think it's called solving right triangles. And that just means fill in the missing information. So, but before we do any of that, you're going to have some problems that are going to say I want to do the other way. So it might say like the sine of what angle is 3/5. And so you would need to say, okay, well, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So if I did 3 and 5 and it was opposite in hypotenuse, where would I be starting? So 3 is over here, and if that's opposite, then I'd need to go back to the C part. So it would be angle C. Okay, it might say what is the cosine of what angle is 0.6. So the first one is a fraction, but that really does mean divide. And so you'd have to kind of figure out okay, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. If I did adjacent over hypotenuse, which version, if I divided it, would give me 0.6? And it really is 3/5 again. 3 divided by 5 is 0.6. So which one is cosine, which is adjacent and hypotenuse, and so that would be angle A. Next to it, and then the hypotenuse. So you'll have a few problems where it's just going to ask different questions like that. The cosine of the angle is 4/5. The sine of the angle is 5/11. The sine of the angle is 0.96. The tangent of the angle is 1.5. So you'll, a couple of them are fractions already, a couple of them are decimals. So you'll just need to kind of figure that out. Okay, so excuse me, we're going to start to use something called an inverse. So what we did the last few days was we were trying to find the length of a side, and we knew an angle. And so then we'd use sine, cosine, or tangent depending on the problem. So here's kind of two things. If you're finding a side, use sine, cosine, or tangent, depending on the problem. If you are finding an angle, use, and it looks like this button on your calculator. Okay, and so you'll need to use that, you're going to have to do a shift or second command button. So on an iPhone, if you turn it sideways, the regular sine, cosine, or tangent buttons come up. Up on the top left-hand side, you'll see something that says second. And if you push that, you'll see that the sine, cosine, tangent turned into the -1 part, which means inverse. Okay, you'll also need to, on your, if you're using an iPhone, on the bottom left-hand corner, there's a button that says rad. You need to push that and make it say DEG for like degrees. Okay. Otherwise, you're going to get the wrong answer. Or does it need to not be pressed? Actually, yeah, on the bottom left-hand corner, you want it to say RAD. And then you should be good when you punch in the numbers correctly. Okay, so when you're finding an angle, use like the inverse. It's also going to appear, you need a decimal. And again, I'll explain that in a minute when we get into the context of the problem. So, excuse me. You'll come into some problems that it's really just practicing punching stuff into a calculator. So you're going to have problems that'll say sine D, and you'll see this thing which just means it's about, it's rounded off, or it could say equal. On those ones it does say equal. Sometimes it's rounded off. So if it says sine D equals 0.8, and so it wants you to find it, if the sine of angle D, where whatever that angle was 0.8, what angle would it actually be? Okay, and so what you want to do is, again, like on an iPhone, I apologize if you don't have an iPhone, but you'll press the second button, then you'll type in 0.8, and then you'll hit the sine -1 button. Okay, so second, 0.8, sine -1, and you get 53.1 degrees. Okay, if you happen to have a calculator, like I have a TI-30 X calculator, it's like a pretty common like calculator, you still would need to hit the second button, but then you would press the sine -1 first, and then type in 0.8, and then enter, and you still get 53.1. So it's just a matter of putting stuff in the right order. Okay, so if we had sine D equals 0.32. So again, you're going to press the second button. It might already be pressed. Just make sure that you can see the sine -1 part. Then you would type in 0.32, like this is on an iPhone, 0.32, and then you would type in sine -1, and it equals 18.66, and it's going to have you round off to 18.7. Okay, so they should be really straightforward problems once you kind of understand how to press the buttons on the calculator. Okay, now let's get into the solve, like this bottom part. So that should go really fast. And then there's 4 of the of this like top question. Sine of what angle is 3/5? Okay, so solving triangles, inverse. Okay, all right, I hope you're doing good. Have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow. Triangles like deal. So you will typically know 3 pieces of information. Or it's two or 3, depends on the problem. Actually, it looks like 2 on all of them. Okay, so you're going to either know 2 sides, or you're going to know a side and an angle. Okay. So if we had, let's see, let's make that one 4 and that one 6. And then it's going to say, solve the right triangle around decimal answers to the nearest tenth. Okay, so what pieces of information are missing? Well, I don't know the length of AC, I don't know angle A, and I don't know angle C. So I need to figure out all 3 of those. So this does take us back a little bit to the first section of the chapter, because I have a 4, I know 2 sides, 4 and 6. I need to figure out AC, which is a third side. That's Pythagorean theorem. So if I'm going to do 4 squared plus 6 squared, and that's going to equal the x squared, or if you put c squared, that's fine, as long as you understand it goes where the x is. So 16 plus 36, 40, 52, and then do the square root. So it is, excuse me, it said decimal answers, so do the square root of 52 as a decimal, which is 7.21 or just 7.2. Okay, so instead of x, I have 7.2. All right, now comes the angle part. So it actually doesn't matter if you do the y first or do the z first. They're kind of independent of each other. But you're going to need to use the 4, the 6, or the 7.2. Now, I would always use the whole numbers when possible, no matter what. Just, it's more accurate. It's typically going to be easier to do. So I'm going to use the 4 and the 6. So I'll just go in order. We'll do angle A, which is the y one. And so I don't know the angle, so what I need to write down is, or if I'm going to do angle A, am I going to use sine, am I going to use cosine, am I going to use tangent? So I'm going to use the 6 and the 4. So that's the opposite and adjacent side, so that means it's tangent. So I'm going to say tangent of angle A. I don't know what it is, but I do know that it is 6 over 4. So if you did 6 divided by 4, you'll get a decimal. And so really what you want to do is tangent inverse, and then you're going to want to have 6 over 4 like in parentheses. Okay, and so depending on your calculator, what you'll want to type in is, if you're using like the iPhone calculator, 6 divided by 4, and you're going to get a decimal. Okay, so 6 divided by 4, and you get 1.5. Okay, and then you're going to press, if it's not pressed already, then you're going to press second, and then you're going to press tangent -1. Okay, and you'll get 56.30 or just 56.3. Okay, so this would be like the y part. Okay, so the y part, 56.3. And then you'll do kind of the opposite, if you will. Like if you go back, okay, now I got to figure out this angle's, the z or the angle c part. Again, I'd go back to use whole numbers because the decimals are rounded off. So what we would have on this one is tangent of angle C equals 4 over 6 because that's opposite and adjacent. And so again, it would be like tangent -1 and then 4 over 6, which is 2/3. So when you typed in 4 divided by 6, you're going to get a big old long like decimal. So it's better to, when you do 4 divided by 6, you get 0.666. It just goes on forever. Just leave it in the calculator, 4 divided by 6. And then type in second and then tangent -1. I've noticed on my iPhone the second button stays pressed, so you might not have to do that every time. So let's type it in. 6, and we get 33.7. So we get 33.69 or 33.7. Okay, and so it takes a lot of steps to get a problem done. And then okay, God, I did all this stuff. Like, how do I know if I even did it right? Okay, well, first thing for the side AC, it's got to be bigger than 4 or 6. So Pythagorean theorem, you're probably going to be okay. What about the 4 and the 6? Okay, well, the 4 is shorter than 6, so the angle across from the 4 should be smaller than the angle that's across from the 6. It is. And if I added 56.3 and 33.7, it should equal 90. If it's like 90.1 or 89.9, that's fine because that's rounding, and like you should be you'll be okay. But it should it shouldn't be more than 0.1 off. Okay. All right. So that's what one looks like with two sides. Don't know any of the angles. So then what if I had 50 and then let's say this was 12. So I need to figure out what angle C is, and then I need to figure out what's AB and what's BC. So angle C should be simple. That's 90, or angle B is 90, angle A is 50, so then it's just, 90 plus 50 is 140, 180 minus 140 is 40 degrees. Okay, simple. So then it kind of goes back to a couple sections ago, like how do I figure out AB or BC? Well, that I know the angle, so I need to figure out the side. So let's work with the BC side. Let's call that X. So I need to figure out sine, cosine, or tangent. And it just depends on where you start. So if I start with angle C with the 40 degrees, then the X is adjacent and the hypotenuse is 12. So adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. If I started with angle A, X is opposite and the 12 is hypotenuse, so I would do sine of 50 degrees. And so it just depends on where you start. I'll just start with A. So we do sine, and I do know the angle, so I put sine of 50. And then that's X over 12. So this is like the ones we did few days ago. Multiply diagonals. X times 1 is x. And then do 12 times the sine of 50. And I get 9.19 or 9.2. So BC is 9.2. And then I need to do the same thing again. So I'll just stay with the 50. But now to do the y part, that would be cosine of 50 degrees equals y over 12. So again, y times 1 is just y, and then you can do cosine 50 degrees is 0.6427, and then times 12, and we get 7.71, or just 7.7. Okay, so 7.7 goes there. Oops, and I'm doing this for a reason. 9.2 goes there because I just want to make sure does my answer make sense. 50 degrees is bigger than 40 degrees, so the side across from the 50, 9.2, should be bigger than the side across from the 40, 7.7. Okay? So those are the main problems you're going to have. There's 6 solving problems. There's 6 of those just type in the decimal.